And welcome in on this Friday. It is May 24th. I'm Claire Crouch alongside Deidre Ransdell from 929 Nash FM. Once again, thank you so much for sitting here alongside with me as Haley takes some time off. So welcome again.
Absolutely. So happy to be here. And I've got an exciting announcement today.
Yes, you've got to tell the world.
I've got to tell you, I am a great aunt today. My niece Mackenzie in Dallas, Texas, had a bouncing baby girl this morning, 9 pounds. 22 inches.
That's a good-sized baby.
And her name is Elliot June Lear. So welcome to the world, Elliot June Lear. And I'm going to Dallas to get to see her this weekend.
Well, congratulations to you. Everybody loves to hear about the arrival of a baby. A nice, healthy, wonderful little bundle of joy. So congratulations. And I hope you have a safe trip down to Dallas.
Thank you.
So we're going to just move right along here now. You'll notice here in a moment that we do have a guest with us here off the top of the show. A little bit different for us, but this has not been a typical week for us at LEX 18. No doubt if you are watching, you know what has transpired here at the station, specifically pertaining to the 12:30 show. We know many of you are upset for a variety of reasons, and we want you to know we hear you. But this has opened up an opportunity for us to talk about what this has exposed about our community, which is why we are so thankful to have Mr. Adrian Wallace, the Vice President of the Kentucky NAACP. Mr. Adrian Wallace, welcome, and thank you so very much for being here today.
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, it's important for you to be here, so we are so thankful. So over these past several days, here at the station, we've received something upwards of 800 emails, and that doesn't count the phone calls from viewers over the past several days, very passionate about this issue that's happened here at our station. Many bringing up the topic of forgiveness. Given the painful history of comparing African Americans to animals, can you explain why this is a topic that is so upsetting, and why when people say, can't we just forgive, it's not that easy?
You know, I was asked that question a couple of days ago, and as I always say, I'm a pastor, and forgiveness is key. Jesus commands us to forgive, and we are expected to forgive one another. But you don't forgive if somebody isn't remorseful or repentful. And in this case, I'm not saying that somebody or anybody isn't specifically remorseful, but at the same time, we have to make sure that we don't gloss over the fact that there are hurt folks and maybe they're not ready to forgive, or maybe that we haven't even had the conversations that need to be had. And so that's what's most important, specifically in pertaining to what happened at this station. The NAACP specifically never called for any specific action towards any individuals. Our main concern has always been the overall societal issues that still exist, in which folks would think it would be okay to compare African Americans to monkeys. And until we can have those honest conversations, then we can't just move forward. We can't forgive, because it's a long, painful history. And a lot of folks, I think it's a blind spot for them why it's so hurtful.
Now, I know I've listened to you on a lot of interviews this week, as I told you before we came on air, and I know one time, if you don't mind sharing once again, you've kind of had that issue brought up in your own personal life. I understand you have a mixed race situation in your own family.
Right.
And the topic of this, you've had to address it before, is that correct?
Yeah, so, you know, I've told folks I have a mixed race family, and even before we had kids, we have 5 kids now, but before we had children, I noticed that in my wife's family, they would refer to their kids as monkeys. And it just blew my mind, because I'd never seen it before. But I had to make sure that my family knew that our children could not be called monkeys because of the painful history that term brings up. And I realized that it was a blind spot. And that's why what's most important as we move forward, as not just a city here in Lexington, but as a nation, we embrace true relationships where we can build cultural competencies, that we can be intentional, not token. We don't need tokenism. We need intentionality to talk about how we move forward as a family, as a society, as a nation that truly believes that we can respect one another. And that's what it comes down to with the issue in Europe. That it should be a time of celebration. But the DJ there very much so knew what he was doing when he compared Meghan Markle's baby to a monkey. And in America, if we don't understand how that was derogatory, then we have a lot of training and education and learning to do from one another.
And so obviously this is not the only conversation that needs to be had.
Yeah.
There are lots of conversations in social media, editorials in the newspaper. Things have really begun heating up. And we want the conversation to be a productive one, and
Yeah.
sometimes
And respectful.
Absolutely, it can only be productive if it's respectful. So, how do you think, as a society, as a community, we can all come together to move forward with this topic and every topic that should be on the table right now? What is a suggestion of other topics that we need to be really addressing, and how do you think we can do that as a community?
Yeah, I think it's all about relationships. I think that's what we said, and it begins with these conversations. You know, I know a lot of folks might be tired of hearing about it, but relationships begin with conversations, and relationships are what they are key to us actually moving forward as a community. There is no community without common memory. There's a great sociologist that said, with no common memory, there can be no true community. And so, for instance, when we talk about the Civil War, a lot of folks will say, well, it's about states' rights. Well, other folks will say it was about states' rights to keep slaves. And there's a lot of debate about that history. Well, if we don't understand our history and where we've come from, there's no way that we can truly understand as a community where we need to go. And so it begins with those conversations. It begins with true relationships, genuine relationships where you care about one another. And if I say that something offends me, that you wouldn't do it. And especially when we're talking about the media in particular right now, then we should realize that, recognize it, and be willing to not use hurtful or harmful language, especially within the media.
And I think, as we've said, you know, one of the things that we've been talking about just ourselves too is that I may not understand what may upset you, but the fact that it upsets you should matter.
Right.
And whether I really get it, I should hear that and try to get it and make
Absolutely.
that effort, and
Absolutely.
and just have your ears open and your heart open to try to make that happen.
Right.
Something I wanted to touch on again with you was that the cultural blind spots. I've heard you talk about that a lot. I've been learning a lot about that myself. I actually hadn't heard that term before this week, and I'm happy to have that in my vocabulary now. And specifically through something that I had heard you say, and it just made so much sense to me, is you can do the wrong thing with good intentions.
Yeah.
And that goes along with understanding that just because maybe you didn't intentionally mean to hurt someone, if it is hurtful, if that person tells you that is racist, that you must respect that, you must ask the questions, and you must learn. Is that correct?
It is. Yeah.
Okay.
You know, it still breaks my heart that we have ball teams named after named Indians and Redskins. Right. Well, our Native American brothers who first inhabited this land say it's disrespectful, it's harmful, and people say, well, I don't care, it's my ball team, and so that's what I'm going to call them. You know, there are nations that have changed the names of birds because it was disrespectful to a people group, yet we're not willing to change the name of a ball team. Or we're not willing to recognize that calling an African American a monkey is disrespectful, or somebody wearing blackface. It has always been meant to demean an entire people group. So, but again, I think a lot of that has to do with learning and learning from our relationships and our conversations with one another.
Absolutely. And I think this goes without saying that it's a conversation that is far from over. But again, I guess one more time, I want to touch on what can we do as a community? So many people are very upset. So how do we open up a respectful dialogue on a topic and an issue that can be very emotionally charged?
Yeah.
People, it seems that from what we've seen from so many of these emails, they believe what they believe and that's it.
Yeah.
How do we move past that staunch status into a respectful dialogue?
So a few years ago, I was a part of a Race and Restoration Summit through the Dream of Destiny initiative. The Dream of Destiny initiative is all, Deidre and I were just talking about this, it's to unite the church. The 11 o'clock hour is the most segregated hour in America. And that's a travesty considering that Jesus talks about us being one. If we believe in him, then we're one, but we still have black and white churches. And so the Race and Restoration Summit was all about bringing together people from different faith traditions, different ethnicities, and saying, hey, how do we move forward? Well, it begins with understanding our history. And so if we negate the fact that America was founded on slavery and that Jim Crow kept blacks in a certain state, and that lynchings perpetuated the reason for the founding of the NAACP in 1909 because of lynchings and every other civil right that was denied. And from once civil rights were restored, we still had to deal with redlining and a lack of economic opportunity and the need for many reforms today. And so until we understand that, and every person understands the need for the government to play a role in that because it was government initiatives and policies that put us in that place in the first place, then there can't be any true healing and restoration. And so we have to begin with those conversations before we can ever begin to truly heal.
Well, Mr. Wallace, thank you. You have certainly given us so much to think about and to use going forward as a community. And as I mentioned, this is a conversation we as a community will certainly be continuing. This won't be the last. And I look forward to hopefully getting to speak with you and chat with you some more, and look forward to what